Many of you will remember a video I did October warning people about these sneaky cold fronts that bring in cold that get underreported. And the thing about cold is if you know it's coming, you can do something about what the cold can do. Now you may not be able to prevent icicles and ice storms from forming on power lines, but you can sure protect your own pipes. But not if you're not told what's about to happen. Some of the video I'm showing you from several months ago detail weather patterns that are happening right now today. You saw the East Coast experiencing a major low pressure storm, just riding right up the coastline like several have done this year. And on the right hand side of the screen, you see a swirling mass of water spinning right off the coast of Spain and France and deluging those countries. Well, this is back in November. Nothing had changed in December, January, and February. We even showed you how the equatorial belt of water had split and was running more north to south. Up in the far right hand side of the globe, you do see one of those very powerful swirling low pressure systems that are dominating the entire globe's weather as we speak. I even zoomed in on one of these storms right as it entered the coast of Portugal, Spain, and guess what? Epic flooding has occurred in Europe, the worst winter of flooding they've ever seen. Thousands of lives have been lost, tens of thousands of homes have been ruined, at least 10,000 people have been displaced, and that is a low number. So we're predicting now that spiraling system that's sailing up the East Coast started over there in the Northwest, dipped down through the Southwest, through Texas, and then back up towards Maine. Now listen, this is from November. This has been going on for 4 months. And some of these systems are getting colder and colder on the back side of these spinning systems, because that's the part of the system that grabs cold air from the top and pulls it down. But when you look at the freeze warnings and all that, you're like, well, gee, what's the deal with Texas? And that's, again, the bottom part of those systems pulls down cold air while the front part shoots up warm air. Now, all a weatherman has to do is go to this instrument. It's actual temperatures from the day before. It's low temperatures. When you see the wind coming down and you see the purple headed your way, you better protect your pipes. You better stockpile. You better get extra blankets. Better bring your pets in. Better cover your garden and put heating lamps on them. But we talked about this. We talked about and used the phrase sneaky cold front. And we warned you about it. We made a couple of videos regarding how some of these systems are so dry they don't show up on radar, and you get cold air in Colorado. Oh, okay, so what? Nobody talks about it, but that cold air keeps on coming down through Colorado, hits New Mexico and Texas, and all of a sudden you got frozen pipes in Texas. 2.7 million people without power. That's what we mean about being prepared. Now here's the wind map of Texas. You can't see the state defined very well, but you can see wind traveling in two different directions at a fast speed. That means there's a counterclockwise spinning low pressure system. Those are usually created over water. Now we go over to the west coast, and we'll show you an example of how cold air comes plunging down. Okay, look at this. Look at the speed at which that cold air is coming down the entire west coast. But funny, the rain just doesn't seem to make it onto land. And then we go up towards the Canadian border on the west coast, Washington, and then up there in Vancouver area. You can see some really high spinning wind. We go up into the Gulf of Alaska, and there you go. Now, how many times have we showed you something like this? This system is so strong that it's pulling water from the equator. But then on the backside, that cold air is coming down. When air is spinning and traveling fast, it creates a counter rotation. Kind of like if you have two wheels touching each other. If one wheel spins left on the sprocket, then the wheel next to it spins the opposite direction. It has to be equal and opposite reaction to the motion of that high-speed wind. That counter rotation a lot of times brings rainfall into California. It's been responsible for a lot of California's rain, is that counter rotating rain. But lately, just in this right now, that water cannot make it onto California land. It's as if they're harping with very low frequency radio wave. And we got some very bizarre stuff coming up here. You got to stay tuned. It's gonna kind of blow your mind. But we move further down the California coast. We're moving towards Baja now, and you see the wind spreading out, but still south, south, south. That's the direction of the flow. So then we go over a little bit to Mexico, on the border with Texas, and we're looking for a low pressure spinning system that would create water and sling it into Texas, and that would pull that moisture down the west coast so well defined and so rapid. And we found some really bizarre stuff. But again, why is Texas being singled out? I mean, even their gas refineries are not producing. And check this out. Texas is off to the right. This is a ton of weather being created due west of Texas, in Mexico even, and it's like water pops out of nowhere because there's a spinning system down there that's shooting water up through the 5 o'clock position and pulling cold air down on the backside. But look at these bizarre wavelength signature. And this is going on in the south of Arizona, southern New Mexico, and into Texas. We're seeing bizarre stuff. We're actually we were looking for the counter rotation because there was no water in this counter rotation. It's kind of invisible. So we looked in closer and closer and started seeing these wavelengths of bizarre looking wavelengths. And when you see a pattern like that, I had a physicist who was a physicist, a particle physicist, a theoretical physicist, but he also was a quantum physicist. He said anytime you see a fingerprint of a pattern, of crisscrossing pattern, he said, think wavelength, think waves. Don't think particles, think waves. Those were some crazy waves, bizarre pattern of waves. Reminds me of the crossing radiation waves we see on some of the satellite imagery in the corona of the sun, a checkerboard pattern. But look at this. This is recent. This is a system that left the United States. The system currently over England right now and France is drenching them, and look what's right behind it. Another system. This has been going on for 4 months now, and we have seen tens of thousands of people have lost their homes. Thousands of people, over 1,100 people have died. And it's in like one country, Portugal, 1,100 deaths this year due to flooding. That's insane. That's just really crazy insane. And we put the wind map on this system that's in the North Atlantic, bearing down on Great Britain and France. And the wind speed does not seem as high out here. But again, we're seeing systems that are back to back to back. And this creates a variety of different features, but that fire hydrant effect, generally shooting off the 5 o'clock position of these spherical storms, is really common, and it releases a lot of water into the atmosphere. But as we scroll around and move a little northward, we see that we're dealing again with numerous swirling vortexes. And again, the eyes on these systems are so predominant, they look like hurricanes from above, but they're not hurricanes. I'm not so used to seeing such a tight eye, well-formed eye on an upper level lobe. And these are very consistent, very powerful. And as we move around, you'll see we're dealing with more than one in the North Atlantic. But looking down on Texas, you can see an area where there is water traveling in 2 different directions. You wouldn't even know that was a system. You wouldn't know it was that sphere, that spiral, because there's some bizarre stuff going on with the imagery between the shading of dark and light, but also there's not a whole lot of moisture in it to actually illuminate the system well enough to see it with the naked eye. Also, we had some solar flaring. What we noticed was the flares that were being released in the theoretical position of Planet X. Those releases were slower, and the ones going downstream, or the opposite position of Planet X, were releasing faster in general. And you might find 1 or 2 exceptions to that rule, but basically, throughout the week, majority of the ejections off to the left in the direction of Planet X released slower, mainly because they were receiving so much resistance, traveling against that second wind. So we are predicting a slight increase in solar activity, earthquakes starting now actually, and whale beachings to go up in the next week as we enter into a new position. So stay tuned, and we will know whether or not this brown dwarf has moved very much since the last month and a half. Also, recovering some images from the computer that got taken down, and we have some bizarre pictures on some of the moons of Jupiter and some of the moons of Mars, but some bizarre stuff going on, really cool anomalies. We're going to be pulling some of those out and featuring them. But also, as promised, We're talking to actually COVID survivors that did the humic acid, colloidal silver, and the vitamin C. We're going to talk to them. We have already talked to them. It's mainly going through the interview and cutting out the swear words. That's how you know it's a real interview, when you got to cut out the swear words. But it's really, really eye-opening to learn from each and every person that gets COVID. And people were taking silver and putting them into their breathing machines. People were taking silver, putting it up their nose. So you want to stay tuned for those interviews.